one of those executive orders, actually, I should say, really suspended payroll tax payments until the end of the year, something Mr. Trump had wanted to get in the stimulus bill rather than his executive order. Welcome now Mattie Duppler. She is founder and president of Forward Strategies and a senior fellow for fiscal policy at the National Taxpayers Union. Mattie, always great to have you on, particularly when it comes to taxes. Explain to us how this works exactly, this payroll tax, because it isn't clear exactly what employers will do.
Well, you know what, David? You nailed it. It's not clear what employers will do, and therein lies the problem. So the administration really only has authority to work with deadlines when it comes to taxes. They don't have the authority to repeal taxes or prevent people from paying taxes. That's what happened this year with the tax filing deadline for income taxes. Treasury used its authority to push that deadline back because we're in the middle of an emergency. So when it comes to the payroll tax, the question here is, who is a taxpayer and what are they liable for? If you're someone who's ever gotten a paycheck, you know that those FICA taxes come out of your paycheck before you ever even see them. Your employer is responsible for making that change in your taxable income. So the question here for employers then is, what do they do with this payroll money that the president wants to go directly to workers? Because the president can't forgive those taxes, employers right now are looking at being liable for them at the end of the year when this executive order expires. That creates a real problem for businesses, particularly right now as they struggle with uncertainty in these very, very uncertain economic times.
So, Mattie, as you say, there's a statute, as I understand, that requires the FICA taxes to be taken out. Does the president clearly have authority at least to delay the collection of them?
The delay is not the question. The question is the impact on the people that the president really wants to impact. Of course, voters, right? He said this is going to go to workers making less than $100,000 a year, but the employers are the ones who are responsible for making that change. So if employers are going to do that, if they're going to stop withholding those Social Security taxes for workers, that means those employers need to make up that cash somewhere. If come next year, the administration says, well, you know, we deferred those taxes, but now that deadline is back on schedule, the businesses and the employers in that scenario are going to be liable for those taxes. So if you're a business who already is facing an uncertain next couple of weeks, months, and maybe even years, what you're going to do is probably sit on that cash. You're not going to redispense it to your workers. You're going to hold on to it until you know that you're not going to be liable for that tax liability at the end of the year when this executive order expires.
Mattie, in a prior life, you worked up there on Capitol Hill. Give us some sense. President Trump has made no secret of the fact he wants to really cut payroll taxes. Does this put more pressure on Congress down the road to actually cut the taxes, not just defer them, but cut them?
Well, you know, there are a couple of idioms when it comes to tax legislating, and one of them is that inertia does work. So when you're looking at the next couple of months, if this deferral is to go into effect and say there's a change in power, a change in administration after the election, then it's the onus on the next administration to say what they're going to do with that tax liability. No politician wants to be the politician raising taxes in the middle of a recession, particularly when they are taxes on workers. The challenge with the payroll tax is workers, when it's taken out of their paycheck, don't necessarily notice when it's put back in. That's why you saw in 2008, President Bush opting for stimulus checks, President Trump, of course, doing the same earlier this spring. When people are written a check from the government, they tend to see that as money, free money in their pocket, rather than getting a little bit of a bump up when their payroll taxes are diminished. So that's going to be a question of politics as we head into the next year. Certainly, I think the inertia will be on the side of taxpayers when it comes to reconciling that deferral, but there's certainly no guarantee that those employers won't be on the hook for those payroll taxes when this executive order expires.
So that's employers, that's employees, that's President Trump. We should talk about why you have those taxes withheld in the first place. They go for Social Security and for Medicare and things like that. Normally, that's sort of a third rail. You don't want to be cutting that. How can you cut the taxes without cutting back on the benefits?
That's exactly right. So the benefits obviously are under the onus of the Treasury Department. The Treasury Department is essentially the trustee of the Social Security Trust Fund. So Treasury has already said that benefits will be made whole. The Social Security actuaries have already told us that even with this downturn in employment because of coronavirus, it really only creates a little bit of a dent in the trust fund solvency. You know, it moves the solvency date up six months or so, but we're still looking at years and years of solvency. policy. So benefits themselves at this moment aren't imperiled. But when it comes to the political argument about this executive order, certainly the president has opened himself up to criticism when you're looking at Social Security taxes. In 2011, when the Social Security tax was cut to help with the recessionary forces there, an act of Congress was used to do that, and the general fund was used to replace some of the revenues that were lost as a result of that tax cut.
So, Mattie, as an expert in this area, do you think that a lot of people, it's basically people who make $100,000 or less, as I understand it, who have their payroll taxes deferred, do you think they'll see more money or not?
They certainly, well, again, with all the questions with taxes, David, it certainly depends. If employers can figure out a way to withhold these taxes from employees' paychecks, those employees would see more money on their paychecks. I think the bigger question headed into election is whether or not they notice. As we saw with the adjudication of the 2017 tax law, people who saw 20 extra bucks a month in their paycheck didn't really seem to notice, even though over the course of the year that adds up to thousands of dollars. So when it comes to how sensitive, I should say, taxpayers are to their paychecks and their manipulation because of taxes, that's always an outstanding question. And I think that when it comes to this executive order, the application, particularly because employers are in charge here, is going to be a little bit tricky.
Fascinating. Thank you so much. Always great to have you with us. That's Mattie Duppler. She is the founder and president of Forward Strategies and senior fellow for fiscal policy at the National Tax